very impressive on a day off, where it's not even a day off as much as the whole country is turned off for the day. If you almost have a feeling like somebody just turned off the ignition for the day, and to spend the morning or part of the day learning, and it's very very impressive. So I want to speak a little bit about there's a Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara says like this. Everybody knows the story. Shaul HaMelech, before he became the Melech, so he went off to look for his father-in-law's donkeys. And Shaul went to go look for the lost donkeys. So the story enough. And they had been traveling for 3 days, and they came close to the town of Shmuel HaNavi. So they decided, somebody said, why don't you go to the Navi's there? So you want to know where your donkeys are, go to the Navi. In the old days, you had a Navi. You ask the Navi, you need a tip on the market, you go to the Navi. You want to know if a Yeshiva Ketana is good for your son, you go to the Navi. The Navi is a good thing. I was going to say, if you want to know if your daughter will get into seminary, but that even a Navi doesn't know. But if what do you call it? If you go, it's a good thing, you have a Navi. So why don't you go to the Navi? Okay. So the Gemara in Brachos and Mem Chesam Beis says the following. The Gemara quotes the pasuk. As they were coming towards the area where the Navi lived, so it says in the Nach, they met a group of girls. And they asked the girls, where does the Navi live? Where do we find Shmuel HaNavi? So if you'd ask a man, where does the Navi live? What would a man tell you on a good day? What would a man say? There. Right? That's it. That's if he's talkative. Right? If he's not talkative, where's the Navi? A point. What do the girls say? Where's the Navi? So the girls say, Kivoachem ha'ir kein timtzuno so b'terem yala habomasa lecho ki lo yochal amad kan ki hu yivorech hazevach acharechen yochlu akrui. I give a whole drasha. Where's the Navi? I give him a whole drasha. Somebody once said women need to learn yes and no are a valid answer also. Right? Yeah, you say to your wife, do we have any apples in the house? No, I didn't have a chance yesterday to go. There was a whole, you happen to know where my sweater is? Well, no, I didn't see it because I know you were yesterday, but it's a drasha. And you ask a man will grunt in the best, and if he's talking to him, he'll say 2 words. So, Gemara says, the kol kach lama. Why did they give such a drasha? Pay attention carefully. Says the Gemara, number 1, lefisha noshim dabrani yosein. Women have a tchuna. Women are dabradios. It's not a good, it's not a bad, it's a mitzias, right? Women have to speak, they have to talk to the kids, they have to raise the kids. That's a tchuna HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them. Used properly, tremendous. Used improperly, so 9 times the amount of lashon hara that men can speak. That's the mitzias. Lefisha noshim dabradios. I had a guy I once gave a shalom bayis shir for men. It's rare, by the way. When you give a shalom bayis shir for women, about 200 women show up. You give a shalom bayis shir for men, 12 men show up, 8 of whom thought it was a daf yomi shir. 4, that's usually what happens. Okay, so I was giving you, this was for Avreikim. So one of the guys, the former toss, I said, by the way, part of basic derech eretz is that when any human being, basic derech is you don't interrupt somebody else when they're speaking. That's basic derech eretz. And the clearest way to show somebody you do not respect them is to interrupt them. And Pirkei Avos says somebody who interrupts in the middle is a golem. He's a golem. It's a sign of a golem. So I said, basic derech eretz. I said, in a home, a husband, basic mechabda yoser megufo. This isn't a joke. It was basic mechabda yoser megufo is that a husband does not interrupt his wife when she's speaking, and it's not difficult. If you hear her voice, don't talk. That's the rule. Hear her voice. So a guy comes over to me after the shir. Now Vrech comes over. And he's got kind of a bit of a dazed look on his face. And he says, Rebbe, you said we're not supposed to interrupt our wife when she's talking, but, my wife, once she gets started, she could really go on for a while. So I said to him, with zero mercy, I said to him, you gave her a ksuba, that's just too bad. That's your job, right? You're going to listen, and you're going to listen politely, and you're going to listen well all the time. Number 1. Number 2, you could also go on for a while, and you probably do. Right? Most men, you listen to your wife, she says her opinion, and then you say, okay, now this is the real story. Then you give a whole drasha, and she has to listen to you enchanted and mesmerized with all the wisdom that we spew out, right? You have to look at us. Most basic derech eretz, you don't interrupt. You don't interrupt. She's talking, well, you're going to have to listen. Number 1. Number 2, so Gemara says, why they speak so long? Lefisha noshim dabroni yosei. Ushmuel amar kidei listakel biyofio shel shol. They wanted to look at Shaul's beauty. Shaul was very handsome. It says in the Nachim, he was the tallest man. They wanted an excuse to be able to look at Shaul for longer. So that's why the Gemara says. Number 3, Lefi Shein Malchus Nogas Bechaverta Kamali Nima. Afilu Kamali Nima. One Malchus does not encroach on the other Malchus, Afilu Kamali Nima, even a hair's breadth. Meaning, right now, he didn't have literally the din of a melech. But the manhig of Klal Yisrael up until this point was Shmuel HaNavi. And Shmuel HaNavi's Malchus, so to speak, was supposed to go to a certain point. Let's say it's supposed to go till 10 o'clock. If it's 9:50 in 50 seconds, that's not the time for Shaul to be anointed. That's Malchus Nogas Bechaverta. So in Mela, they had to extend their speech. They said an extra sentence in order to take up the extra 10 or 15 or 20 seconds, in order that Shaul HaMelech would be anointed prematurely. That's what the Gemara says. I have a question. Why do we need 3 answers? What's the Gemara telling us? There are 3 answers. Nashim Dabranio saying, and because they wanted to look at Shaul, and because Ein Malchus Nogas Bechaverta Kamali Nima. I'm very puzzled by this. So I thought, the pshat is like this. The pshat is that there are 3 systems that are functioning simultaneously in the Bria. System number 1 is what we call Teva. There's the natural running of the world. System number 2 is what we call Bechira. And system number 3, thank you very much. System number 3 is what we call Hashgacha. And one of the questions that I think that we all have on a regular basis, how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu work all these things in perfect consonance? How does Bechira and HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what we're going to choose in advance? And all the famous philosophical questions, one way or another, they seem to be working in perfect harmony with each other. What are the Chazal telling us over here? Look what had to happen. Shaul HaMelech, number 1, there's Teva. What's the Teva? Nashim Dabrani Yosei. That's a Teva. That's a nature. That's the world. That's the Teva of the world. They speak because that's the Teva. Number 2, there's Bechira. What's the Bechira? They want to choose. They choose to look at Shaul. They don't have to look at Shaul. They're choosing to look at him because Shaul is very handsome. And number 3, there's what we call Hashgacha. That means Ein Malchus Nogas Bechaverta Kamali Nima. Because Baruch Hu isn't going to allow for this Malchus to encroach on the other Malchus. So what does he do? He brings about through Teva and Bechira, understand what's going on here. And this is just one example. There's one example of what's going on in the entire world, that through Teva and Bechira with one, and look what's doing it. Teva, Bechira, and Hashgacha are all being triggered and functioning based on a group of seminary girls who are talking a little more than was justified under the circumstances. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. That's what the Gemara is teaching us, among other things. So, when it comes to the idea of Hashgacha, so there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Afu ra'o gugolas achas shetzof al pnei hamayim. Hillel was walking, and Hillel saw a skull floating on the water. Amar lo, he said to the skull, Al da'atef atfuch, because you drowned others, you were drowned. V'sof b'tafayich yitufud, and the end of those who drowned you, is that they will also be drowned. So there are several problems here, several questions here we have to ask. Question number 1, which is the question that nobody wants to ask. People are afraid to ask it. A 5-year-old would ask it, by the way. Which is, why is Hillel talking to a skull? Afu Ragul Goy sees a skull floating on the water. Why is he talking to Amar Lo? Well, here's a Nasi. I guess Nasi's talked to skulls. Why are you talking to a skull, number 1? The valid question. Question number 2, because you drowned others, that's why, who said he drowned other people? Who said he drowned? How do you know that he drowned other people? There are plenty of people who drown. There's statistically people who go fishing. They have a very high statistic of people who go fishing out in boats and they drown because they're drinking beer while they're in the boat. And somehow at a certain point, the combination of boat, beer, and water leads to, statistically, people fall off boats and they drown. Okay. Number three. Who said everybody who drowns, everybody else ends up being drowned? We see plenty of people who don't. The idea that you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Look at the mafia. That's something that happens. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I remember there was a guy in Chicago growing up, there's a guy. No, that was Sam G. That was a different guy. I studied the mafia. I actually read a lot about him when I was a teenager. It was a potential career choice. But it's a good parnasa. I don't know why you're laughing. It's a very good parnasa. So there's a guy in New York, not New York. The guy in New York, his name was Tony Big Tuna Accardo. That was his name. And one day he disappeared. He was one of the mafia chieftains, Tony Big Tuna Accardo. Some of you may remember him. And he disappeared. And they found him about 3 days later in the trunk of a car. Found his body and tried. I remember as a kid thinking to myself, the tuna ended up in the can. Tony. They found him. Now, so sometimes they end up. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Sometimes the mafia chieftain dies with his wife and children and grandchildren around him. This guy's got blood all over his hands. So who said that just because he drowned, somebody else he's going to? And Hillel says, So what's going on here? In question number 4, why is it in Aramaic? Pirkei Avos is mostly Lashon HaKodesh, almost exclusively Lashon HaKodesh. And here, Hillel comes along and he says something which is in Aramaic. Okay. So the answer is that Aramaic at the time, Aramaic was the spoken language of the people. Nowadays, not nowadays, but at one point, the Jewish people spoke Yiddish, right? Obviously, nowadays the language of the Jewish people is obviously English. And if it's clipped with a Chicago accent, then even more. That's the language of the Jewish people. So, right, parents, that's the that's the way it should be. If it isn't, that's the way it should be. And so that's the language of the Jewish people. That in the time it was Aramaic. Hillel is the Nasi, and he wants to drive home an extremely important lesson. That's why he says it in Aramaic, and that's why he's talking to a skull. If you ever want, Hillel's the Nasi. He's accompanied by Talmidim everywhere he went. You ever want to get anybody's attention? Talk to a skull, right? Whether it's good attention or not good attention, they will certainly pay attention. I always recommend it for Rebbeim also, in a cheder. If you're a Rebbe and a cheder, come in and put a skull on the desk. Rebbe, what is that? That's the kid that didn't do his homework last week, remember? Then you're going to get cooperation, attention, everything you can, all with one skull. You get everything you want. Okay, so it comes along Hillel, and Hillel is talking to a skull in Aramaic. Why? Because he wants to drive home a lesson to his Talmidim that they're never going to forget. What's the lesson? It says, Al da'atef tatfuch. Now listen, pay attention carefully. This is what the Mepharshim say. From a human perspective, if you walked by a lake and you saw Ruvain take Shimon's head and dunk it in the water and drown him, and then Levi would come along and he would grab Ruvain and dunk his head and drown him, how would you feel? Justice has been served. Hillel is saying, not that that's what did happen, but he's saying from a human perspective, you know why you were drowned? Because you drowned others. And those that drowned you, they themselves will be drowned. Meaning, the rule of Hashgacha in the world is that there's a mida keneged mida with extreme precision. In the same way, from a human perspective, because we lack the overall view of seeing how things work, from our perspective, if that's in our mind, that's how justice works. So in our mind, if we knew that's what happened, we'd say, we'd have that warm feeling in the heart. The bully beat up the little kid's big brother came and beat up the bully, justice has been served. It doesn't always happen that way. That's why Hillel concludes and he says, the sof mitafayich yetufa. The end of those who drowned you is they themselves will be drowned. The end, the Mepharshim say, does not refer to here. If you don't see the results in this world the way you want to see the results, the sof, in the world to come, he's going to get exactly, precisely what it is that he's supposed to get. And Mimela Hillel is teaching us over here the clear and very, very precise Hashgacha. How does Hashgacha work? Not only that it's Ein Malchus Nogaz Bechaverta Kemoli Nima on a time scale, but the Hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu works precisely that you get exactly what you deserve in the cycle of life. There's a Gemara in Brachos that says, if a person sees he's going through suffering, Yisurim, the Gemara says, Yefash Peish B'Masav. What's Yefash Peish B'Masav? Do a little soul searching. What about the fact that you need a Navi for that? Imagine a guy gets his finger caught in the door. Gets his finger caught in the door. Ooh, why did he get it? Well, 2 days ago he was shoplifting. Okay, yeah, but 3 days ago, he hit somebody. and 4 days ago he stole something from the. How do you know what it's coming from? Right? The answer is we don't know, because you need a navi in order to know precisely. But there is enough of a remez that we know what kivun, what direction to start searching in. I had when I was, tell you a personal story, when I was a Bechira in Yeshiva, I was walking with a friend of mine. Yeshiva, Ruth Peretz, Yeshiva, Chicago, Yeshiva, not Yeshiva. You know, when we're from Chicago, we drink pop in Yeshiva on the roof, right? That's the Chicago jargon. So I was walking with a friend of mine, and we're walking. We would walk down King George Street, and we made a right turn on Rehov Yafo. And as we made the right turn on Rehov Yafo, we walked. There's a pipe sticking out of the ground about this high. And my friend, as he walked past, he smacked himself right on the shin really hard. And he grabbed his shin and he started hopping around on one foot in the middle of King George and Yafo. So I did what any normal person would do. I dissolved laughing. It was hysterical. You know, the guy's hopping around. About a year and a half later, I was engaged. We were in Sanhedrin, Rechevet, and we were going to visit my wife's relatives to be introduced. And she was on the sidewalk, and I decided to cut across the lawn. And as I cut across the lawn, there was a pipe sticking out of the ground about this high. Right? And I hit myself on the shin real hard. My second thought, not my first thought was, ow, this hurts. My second thought was, as I hopped around, was, I know why this is happening. Right? Because it was too precise. Now, the truth of the matter is, I don't know why it's happening. I don't know why it's happening. Because it could be any one of it could be ritzas reglaim lehara. It could be having kicked somebody at some point. It could be having run away from a shear. It could be a million and one different things. What we understand is that when something happens, the Gemara says, Yefash v'shemasav, try to trace something that is related to it. Maybe there's more than one thing that needs to be fixed. Remember, I think I told you 2 years ago, I was once sitting at the table, I bit my tongue. I told you a story. I bit my tongue real hard. And you know what happens? You bite your tongue. This was a good one. And I bit my tongue. And there's always somebody at the table who says, "Are you okay?" Yes, I always put my face on my knee in the middle of a meal. It's just a minute. It's a little minute we have. I'm saying like, and it started, you're tearing and everything. Finally, I start breathing again, and you know, I was like, my God, it really hurt. And I said, "Oh, it must be because of lashon hara." So a former friend of mine was sitting at the table, and he goes, "Lav dafka." Could be sheker, onas dvarim, habanas panim, nivel. He went through a whole list, which is why he's a former friend. Yeah, you want to go through a whole list. But the likelihood is that if something happens, the likelihood is that it's something to do with misusing the mouth, one way or another, misusing the mouth. That's what we understand, is that if it's happening, it's not random, it's not haphazard, and ultimately there's a precise reason for it. There's a Gemara in Sukkah. The Gemara says, we're all well-known Gemara, I'm sure everybody knows it. The Gemara says, I think that I want to talk about a life. This is something that we all go through at some point or other, and depending on how much we've worked on it, it affects our own happiness in life. The Gemara says that Shlomo HaMelech is a Gemara in Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara says one day Shlomo saw the Malach HaMavis. Chazia l'malach hamavis dehavika otziv. He saw the malach hamavis. The malach hamavis looked sad. Omar leah mayatzivas. Someone said, "Why are you sad?" I mean, it's not a great job. You know, it's not like running the ride at an amusement park. You know, I'm not sure exactly what. Oh no, those guys always look sad. Omar leh. He said, "Why are you sad?" Omar leh de kabo minai hanu tarti kushoi to yosvi hocha. I have sent to terminate the life of these two kushois, two young men that are here in the area, and I haven't been matzliach. So what did Shlomo HaMelech do? Masrinu l'seirim. Shlomo HaMelech handed them over to the shadim of some sort. Shadrinu l'mechuzah Luz. He sent them to the city of Luz. Luz was a city, Chazal say, there was an ancient city of Luz, where no one ever died in the city of Luz. No one ever died, although they were called the losers. But at the end of the day, no one in the city died. In the city of Luz, no one in the, maybe they called them that for Ayin Hara. They knew why they call themselves losers, but really, no one in the city of Luz died. Kimatu lemechuzah de Luz, when they got right to the gates, to the entrance of the city of Luz, shechivu, the two men died. He saw the Malach HaMavos was all smiles. He's all smiles. Amar le, amai b'dichas, why are you laughing? So the Malach HaMavos said, why are you so happy? Amar le, be'asar debo minai tamon shidartinu. Exactly where I needed them, that's where you sent them. Exactly where I needed them, that's where you sent them. Miyad Pazal Shalom Melech, he said, Ragloi de bar inish inu raven bay. A person's feet take responsibility for him. Wherever it is he's needed, lasar de mitvoi taman mavilin yosei. That's what the Gemara says. What are Chazal telling us? The answer is like this. Imagine there are two men standing by a 16-lane highway. And the first guy closes his eyes, runs across the highway irresponsibly. Cars are slamming on their brakes left, right, and center. And he makes it across the highway, and on the other side of the highway finds a wallet stuffed with $20,000 in it. The second guy looks both ways, waits for all the traffic to clear, and in the middle of the highway, a light aircraft crashes on him and kills him. Question, who did the right thing? The first guy or the second guy? Who did the right thing? And what's the acid test? The acid test is, if you're the third guy, what are you going to do? Well, read the data. First guy closed his eyes and made $20,000. Second guy walked carefully. You know the old saying, to avoid that rundown feeling, look both ways before crossing the street. So the second guy looked both ways, and what ends up happening? He ends up getting killed by. Now you're the third guy. What are you going to do? The answer is, you know what you're going to do. You're going to look both ways. Probably look up also. You look both ways. You look up just to make sure, right? New habit. And then you're going to cross. Why? The answer is like this. On the one hand, you have the Bechira. And the Bechira is to choose to do the right thing. But what we often forget is that that's where our responsibility ends. Our responsibility ends with choosing to do the right thing. The results are still going to be governed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to do the right thing. If we were Shlomo Melech and we met the Malach HaMavos, and the Malach says, well, there are two guys I'm trying to hunt down. What's the first thing you would do? Well, call the Seirim and get them off to the city of Luz. Nobody ever died in the city of Luz. Get them into the city of Luz. He did exactly what he should have done under the circumstances. Elamai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu running the world. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who's running and determining the results. For a person like in our day in life, did it ever happen to you? And not did it ever happen to you. I should say, how many times did it happen to you? You went and you bought an item, right? You bought new shoes, you bought a sweater, you bought a new living room set. And then on the way home from buying the shoes, you paid 250 shekels for your shoes. And on the way home from buying the shoes, you saw some little store that you've never noticed before, and he's got a sign in the window, the shoes you paid 250 for are now worth, he's got it for 220. And you're Jewish. Right? Now, how do you feel about this? Maybe a test of yichus over here. If you remain in a good mood, right? We gotta check your yichus, right? If you're like, oh boy, and in the end it didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out. People spend so much time wasting their life on decisions they've already made, where they could. If I would have known, didn't happen to those of you who drive. You decide, well, should I take this road or I take this road? Well, no, I think we'll take this. So you think about things you take before GPS. Right now we have GPS, so GPS does everything for us. But before GPS, right? You decide, you know what? We're going to go this route. And then you go this route, there's a truck that's broken down and he's blocking traffic and you're caught 45 minutes. Oy vey, are you a Navi? Are you a Navi? And if you would have gone the other way, I guarantee you the truck would have gone the other way too. Right? You would have gone, I knew a story about a kid in first grade had a rough time. He had a bad year with the Rebbe. So the parents transferred him to a different school. Gets to go for that Rebbe was transferred to the other school for second grade. He had the same Rebbe for second grade. And I want to tell you something. If the parents say, okay, we're going back to the other school, I guarantee you the Rebbe would have gone back to him. They're attached like a yo-yo on a string, without a doubt. That's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a decision. Our job, our responsibility is to behave, is to make the proper ishtadlus. More than that, Rav Dessler writes in the Hakdama somewhere. I think it's in the Hakdama. I don't remember. Rav Dessler writes the following: sometimes you see people who are no more talented gifted or blessed in any way than the people around them. And something needs to be done. And a person who is no more gifted than anybody else steps forward and he takes on the responsibility. And why does he take it on? Because this is what needs to be done. And then he gets a degree of siyata d'shmaya, and Rav Dessler writes, he accomplishes far more out of proportion to what his natural abilities and talents are. Why? Because he started. He took the step. He started doing it. He made the hishtadlus. And when he made the hishtadlus, you know, the history of Rav Dessler himself, it's almost a self-description. Because Rav Dessler in 1940, Rav Dovid who was the Dayan, Rav Dovid was the Sheikhet in the city of Gateshead, and Rav Dovid sent out 22 letters to Rabbanim all over England. He said, let's start a kollel in Gateshead. 18 of the Rabbanim did not bother responding. 3 of the Rabbanim wrote back, it might be a good idea, but in case you haven't heard, there's a world war going on, and this is not the best time to try to get money out of people. People don't have money. One Rav Dessler wrote back, said, great idea, let's start. And Rav Dessler did it. And Rav Dessler writes, the person who takes the step, and he's no more talented than anybody else, that's Rav Dessler saying it, he probably was, but he says he, in general, he's no more talented than anybody else. He took the initiative, he took the first step, in Mela, he's going to get the siyata d'shmaya, he's going to accomplish far more out of proportion. He looks, he reads the map, and it doesn't make any sense to him. But under the circumstances, that's not our job. When it comes to a mitzvah, we don't work necessarily, especially tzorchei tzibur, we don't work necessarily limited by logic. Any organization, any institution, any shul that has started, never made it because it was logical. It was not logical. By al pi derech hateva, it can't work. How could it be that every frum community has shuls, schools, mikvos, and everything they need, and none of us have any money? How could that be? How could that be? And they keep on going, and they keep on building more, and none of us have any money, and the government doesn't help. And it's never been in history. And it's never been in history. How does it happen? Because it happens with siyata d'shmaya. It happens l'mal min hateva. Because people took the initiative and took the step. In our neighborhood, we have the Magen Avraham Shul. Those of you who have been in the Neve Yaakov, we have the Magen Avraham Shul. I want to tell you how the Magen Avraham Shul is, and it's a big shul. Three-story building. It started, of course, we started in a caravan like everybody else. That's already minhag hamakov. You have to start in a caravan. You're not allowed to start with the shul. But it started because there was a Jew from England an eccentric Jew, never got married. He used to come to Eretz Yisrael twice a year, very wealthy man. Came to Eretz Yisrael twice a year, and he would distribute cash to poor people. He stayed in the Central Hotel, the Malona Merkaz, which was whatever it's called nowadays. But he used to stay there. Poor people would come, and he would just give them cash out of his suitcase. He would distribute cash. In our neighborhood, in Kamenetz, in Neve Yaakov, when it started about 35 years ago, the Avrech, who was the energy behind the entire project, he went to see this man because they needed a shul. So he was in line with all the other aniyim, waiting. He wanted an interview. And at a certain point, the gabbai came out. The man's gabbai came out. He said, that's it, no more for the night. Everybody go home. So everybody went home, except for this Avrech. This Avrech went around a side door, pushed it open. The door was open. In the hotel, the door was open. So he walked right up to the guy's room. He knocked on the door. The guy said, yeah, came in. No gabbai in the way either. He just came in, sat down. He said, well, we want to build a shul. He says, that's great. My father was nifter. I want to donate a shul. I want to dedicate a shul. Made a commitment on the spot of $50,000. We got the shul. It was built. That was the beginning of the money. Where'd it come from? You made the ishtadlus. Now all of the schus of whatever the tefillas in the shul, he has a share of the schus. Because you can't look and calculate when it comes to the mitzvah. You just have to do. Make the effort. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about the results. I had a guy once at Or Sabeach. It boggles my mind. I had a guy once at Or Sabeach years ago, and he was in the yeshiva for a few months. He came to my Gemara shir, came to my Chumash shir every day. Had a Gemara shir to Chumash shir. The guy came for months, and he was still marginally come Shomer Shabbos. Wasn't quite there yet. One day we walk in there. We had to give the Chumash shir. It was supposed to be at 3:00 in the afternoon. There was a bris in the hall where we give the Chumash shir. There was a bris. And they didn't finish till about 5 to 4. And the guys for the Chumash shir were building about. I had 5 minutes left. So I said, you know what, guys, let's just say we'll have a 5-minute shir. what can you teach them in 5 minutes? I told them a story about the Kelm Yeshiva. That in Kelm, they have a 5-minute Seder. In Kelm, they used to have 5-minute Seder Motzei Shabbos. You know that. In Kelm, officially, there was a 5-minute Seder Motzei Shabbos. Everybody went to the base medrash. You learned for 5 minutes for 2 reasons. Number one, to discipline you, to see what 5 minutes is worth, what you could do in 5 minutes. I mean, many yeshivas today have 5 minutes during, but that's unofficial. Or guys are there for 5 minutes. That's unofficial. Officially, it's a bit longer. But in Kelm, it was officially a 5-minute Seder. They ought to try that in yeshivas. Do it for 5 minutes, then everybody will be on time, and everybody will be there for longer than Seder. It'd be a great thing. So this guy, I called everybody, and I said, listen, we'll learn for 5 minutes. So I called him in. We sat down 5 minutes. We learned. I told him about Kelm. A couple of months later, guy's leaving the yeshiva. So he says to me, I want to thank you for like, the thing that affected me most, I put hours into this guy. Hours and hours. He says, the thing that really affected me was that 5-minute shiur. I wish I would have known that at the time. I'd rather work 5 minutes a day. I wish I would. You understand? I have no idea. It has nothing to do with what we're putting into it. It has to do what you have to do. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about the results. Okay. I want to show you something that really needs a hezbollah. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says like this. And Daf Yud Ches. It's a Pella. Those of you, I'm sure everybody has learned it. It's a Pella every time you learn it. The Gemara says, Shechola Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva got sick. He was ill. Holach Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion Levakro. So Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion went to visit Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva said to him, Chanina Achi, Iyata Yodea, don't you know, She'uma zu min hashamayim himlichua? Don't you know that this empire, the Romans, were coronated? They became the Malchus. It was a Gzeira min hashamayim. And ani shomati alecha, I heard about you, she'ata yoshev ve'osek b'Torah, you sit and you teach Torah, you're learning Torah, umakil kehilos barabim, you gather the multitudes, the Sefer Torah, munachocha b'chekecha, holding a Sefer. Don't you know the Romans made a Gzeira not to learn? Why are you doing that? Omar lo min hashamayim rachamu. Hashem yirachem. Hashem will have mercy. Omar lo, Rabbi Chanina said to him, Ani omer lecha dvarim shel tam. I'm telling you logic. I'm telling you something logic. Ve'ata omer li min hashamayim yirachamu. I'm telling you, like, and you're telling me, it's like when you talk to teenagers. Isn't that how we talk to teenagers? No matter, whatever you say is very logical. And their response is never logical. Right? You say, well, listen, if you go on a teal up north, and you go all the way to the Syrian border, and you do alligator wrestling, and bungee jumping, and skydiving, this is dangerous. They just said, Yibseder, Mina Shemayim Yirachamu, right? The kid says, I don't say, what are you so worried about? Listen, alligators are dangerous, Syrians are dangerous, skydiving is dangerous, and the friends you're going with are most dangerous of all, right? Mina Shemayim Yirachamu. Toma and me, im lo yisrufu osla v'sefer Torah. I would be very surprised they don't burn you with that Sefer Torah. That's what Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva said to Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion. So there are two questions here. Huge questions. Question number one, what do we know about Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva? Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva is the one in the 6th parak of Pirkei Avos. It says Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva was once walking, and he saw a man, and the man offered him. He said, come live with us. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva said, give me millions of dollars, and I won't live anywhere except in the city of Sofrim, Chachamim, and Sofer. This is a man who loved Torah. Number one. Number two, what's his taina? What happened to Rabbi Akiva? What happened to Rabbi Akiva when Rabbi Akiva, Papus ben Yehuda, ended up with Rabbi Akiva in prison? He said, Papus ben Yehuda said to Rabbi Akiva, before prison, he said, Rabbi Akiva, you're teaching Torah barabim. How can you teach Torah barabim? The Romans made a Gzeira not to teach Torah. What did Rabbi Akiva say? Famous mashal of the fox and the fish. And if we're in danger when we're not in water, we're going to certainly be, if we're in danger when we're in water, we're certainly going to be in danger outside of the water. Remember the mashal, Rabbi Akiva, the famous, we quote that mashal all the time. So Rabbi Akiva is saying, listen, if we're in trouble, we have to be learning Torah. What else should we be doing? So why does Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva have a taina, Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion? In the mashal, the fox and the fish. It's not the mashal, the pella. Fox said to the fish, why don't you come out, live on dry land, just like our ancestors did. I don't know. I've been around for a while. I've never met fish on dry land with a fox. You know, fish at dry land. You know, I don't know. We had goldfish, and they were always in the bowl. They died there too, but Jews always tend to overfeed them. And that doesn't happen. If you give cholt to goldfish, it's not good. It's not good for them. Now, I understand what happened. What happened over Rabbi Kiva? Rabbi Kiva, we paskin like it. Rabbi Kiva says that we don't. That we have to teach Torah. Why is it? What's Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva's title? The answer is Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva is saying to Rabbi China ben Teradian. Forshim say to Rabbi China ben Teradian, listen. Number one, you're out there in open defiance of the Romans. There's a big difference between you and Rabbi Akiva. You know what the difference is? The Sefer Torah munach l'cha b'cheikecha. You're holding a Sefer Torah in your arms. What's the difference? Rabbi Akiva doesn't say it. Look at the Gemara in Brachos on Samach Aleph. It doesn't say that Rabbi Akiva was holding Sefer Torah. What's the difference? The difference is, imagine the Romans come in, and there's Rabbi Akiva teaching Torah, and the Romans break in. What if they say, what's this gathering all about? Oh, just, the community's getting together. We're having a rally for the community. We're trying to raise money for a school, right? But he's got a way out. Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian, you're holding a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah, munach lo b'cheikecha. Anything b'cheikecha means is beloved. You're putting it right, as the expression goes, you're putting it in the Roman's face. And you don't have any way out. If they see what you're doing, that means the Romans understand that you are trying to defy them. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva, say to Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian, there's a way to do things. There's a proper way, not a proper way. On the one hand, you got to make yishtadlus. Listen, the other, you got to be moser nefesh. But even within the realm of being moser nefesh, you could cross into irresponsible, for Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian at his madrega, what Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva held, you could cross into an area of what we would call above and beyond the danger that you should be taking. And you're creating a situation where you're not only being misakin yourself, not only you're endangering yourself, you're endangering all the other people. Because you're not leaving them a route of escape. When it comes to making the choice has to be a responsible choice. Later, Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian says to him, do I have a portion? What's my portion in Olam Haba? What did Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva say to him? Give me an example of something you do. Mani l'chai Olam Haba. Says, give me an example of something you do. What did Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva say? What Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian says? He says, Mos Shel Purim got mixed up with my regular Mos Shel Tzedakah and I gave it away. That means he had set aside money for a Sudas Purim, and he gave away the money for a Sudas Purim with his regular tzedakah, and he never reimbursed himself. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva said, I should have a portion in Olam Haba like you do. That's what the Gemara says. Question. Rav Dessler asked this, others. What's a bigger thing? Okay, you were Moser Nefesh, and therefore they're going to burn you in your Sefer Torah. But you were Moser Nefesh for Torah, right? What do you think is a bigger schus? To be Moser Nefesh for Torah, or to give away an extra $20 of tzedakah on Purim because your money, Mos Shel Purim, mixed up with your tzedakah? Which is a bigger schus? I mean, if I was Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian, and I asked Rabbi Yossi ben Kisva, do I have a chelik in Olam Haba? Well, give me an example of something good that you've done. I would have said, well, I've taught Torah Barab in open defiance of the Romans. Okay, maybe because I had a sefer, I was a little more enthusiastic about it, or blatantly open about it than Rabbi Akiva, but that's still the example I would have given. And instead he says, no, well, I got $20 mixed up from my Purim money, and I gave that away. And Rabbi Yossi goes, ooh, michalkach hayachalki. Why? Why is that michalkach hayachalki? So Rabbi Yankala Galinsky answers, because when you give away the Mos Shel Purim, that got mixed up with the tzedakah, that's something b'tzina. That was done discreetly. Nobody knows about that. The milah of doing something discreetly is such a powerful milah that overrides teaching Talmud Torah Barabim, which is something public where you get a little more prestige out of it. Number one. That's what Rabbi Yankala Galinsky says. Rav Dessler says it's because you as a person, you, me, us as a person, what determines our madrega in Olam Haba? You know what our madrega is? Our madrega is not the big, wonderful things that we've done. Our madrega is the little things that we do every day. Say good morning to your wife with a smile. Say good morning to the bus driver. Daven in shul consistently. Turn off the cell phone before you go into shul consistently. go to a Daf Yomi Shir consistently, go to your Chavrusa consistently. The series of little things, some of them aren't so little. I don't say Daf Yomi Shir is a little thing. The things that we regard as the routine, that defines who we are. That's our station in Olam Haba. Somebody knocked on the door and you suddenly, in a moment of inspiration, gave him 1,000 shekels instead of the usual 10 or 20, because that day you happened to be in a good mood because Pesach was over and all your relatives are leaving, so you gave the guy, you happen to write him out 1,000 shekel check. That's a beautiful mitzvah, but that's not who you are. That's not who you are. That's in a moment of inspiration. Who you are is the little things, the consistent things. That Mos Shel Purim Shenitzar B'Moshe, that's the definition of who a person is. And therefore, when it comes to making the choices, sometimes we look at the big choices. What we should really be looking at is choosing the smaller things. When it says in Pirkei Avos, Havizor b'mitzvah kala k'v'chamura. Havizor b'mitzvah kala k'v'chamura. So I think as Rav Volbe says, you know why Mishnah emphasizes the little things? Sometimes in life we want to improve. We want to improve. We all want to improve. I think there's nobody who doesn't want to grow. The problem is we look to see something magnificent that we could do. You know what happens? We take on something difficult. You know what happens? We'll do it for a week, we'll do it for 2 weeks, then we're going to break. We can't keep it up. Take on something that's achievable. Take on something that's doable. Instead of Daf Yomi is too much, so do the Amud Yomi. Amud Yomi is too much, do the Mishnah. Take the thing that you know for sure that you could do, that mitzvah kala is worth. That's the importance of the mitzvah kala. So, when it comes to heading up for Shavuos, as we're moving towards Shavuos, so we all have this issue. And the issue is that the Gemara indeed says, before a person is born, the Gemara says there's an oath that is invoked. They make us take a shvua. What's the shvua? The shvua is, be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha. That's a shvua. We've all taken that oath. Rabbosai, we are under oath. We've made that oath. It says they give us a shvua. Number one. Number two, it also says, Chazal say, our life circumstances are predetermined. It's not up to us, poor or rich, healthy or not healthy. That's all, smart or not smart. All of that is determined. There's only one thing left to us. Be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha. That's up to us. Okay? Now we got a problem here. We have a problem here. Because at the end of the day, when the Torah says, yeah, we have an obligation to be a tzaddik. Chazal say that a person is born without choosing what kind of tchunas he's going to have. A person does not have that choice. So, in the Torah it says like this, by Potiphar in Eshes Potiphar. What does it say? It says that when Mrs. Potiphar started up with Yosef, what did Yosef do? He said, they're sorry. The Torah says that Potiphar gave Yosef everything, ki im es halechem asher hu ochel. Gave Yosef everything. He was in charge of everything. Ki im es halechem asher hu ochel. Says Rashi ala makom, what's halechem? Zo ishto. Two drives that a person has in the physical realm. There are two physical drives that a person has. One is lechem in the literal sense, food, and one is lechem in the euphemistic sense, zo ishto. Those are the two drives. Shavuos, what do? We bring shtei alechem. Says the Nesiva Shalom, the shtei alechem that we bring on Shavuos is to teach us that those two areas of life, which are the physical drives, can only be controlled through one thing, through Torah. That's the Torah that we receive on Shavuos. That's the shtei alechem, corresponds to the two drives which are symbolized by lechem. Ki im es alechem asher hu ochel. Physical lechem, literal lechem, and euphemistic lechem. There's only one problem. There's another pasuk in the Torah. There says, B'zei asapecha toch alecha. that the lechem is only consumed b'zeyas apecha. Zeyas apecha means in order to consume it properly, it requires zeya. It requires a certain amount of work. That work is the work that has to go into Torah learning. The only way to gain control over these areas, which we have no choice as far as selecting them, that's what we're born with. We have to activate our Bechira. The only way to control that Bechira is going to be through B'zeas Apecha Toch Alechem. Finally, he asks the question. Says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu offered the Torah to the other nations. He started with Esav. I got to Yishmael, the B'nai, who was it? The B'nai, what do you call it? The B'nai, B'nai Shmuel, B'nai Ammon and Moav. But he started out with the B'nai Esav. What does it say in the Torah? Can't murder. No. We're not going to be able to handle that. So it's clear from Chazal that there's a tviyah of some sort on the B'nai Esav. It's clear that there's a... What are you asking questions for? You should have just taken the Torah. I mean, what's wrong with that? Somebody comes over and says, okay, I'd like you to embrace an entire life system. What would any normal reaction be? Do you mind give me just an inkling of what this is going to involve? I mean, if it means eating with chopsticks, I don't know if I can handle it. I mean, give me what's wrong with asking? Yet Chazal imply that there is something wrong with asking. You know what was wrong with asking? First time we met Esav, what did he do? Comes in from the field, says, give me some mina adoma zeh. How come you didn't ask then what's in the pot? Then you came in and you were hungry. And when you came in and you were hungry and he gave him lechem in the zid adoshim. Oh, there you're going to consume your lechem, and there you're not so concerned about what's in the pot. You came in, I'm hungry right now. Let me have whatever it is. Do you want to know anything about nothing? Nothing I want to know about it. Oh. Now you're asking questions? You know what that means? It means you're not hungry. If you're really hungry, you would take it, no questions asked. So what does he do? He turns to Klal Yisrael. And he gives it to Klal Yisrael. Kafalem as har kegigis. Do you know why he was kofar in them? I'm not going to tell you what we said last year. That, I'm sure you all remember every word. You know why he was kofalem har kegigis? Imagine, this we conclude, a man's walking on the street. You see a poor man. And you walk over to the poor man, and the poor man says, I haven't eaten for, been a while. It's been about a day since I've eaten. And you pull some food out of your pocket, say, here, I happen to have some extra cheesecake from the shear. Here, have some food. The poor man says, no, I don't want food. I'd rather have money. Well, I'm going to give you money. I don't even have money. I'll give you the food. I don't want the food. I'm telling you, buddy, you can eat the food. I want, all right, okay. And you walk away. Then you go home. And your kid's there, fighting with your wife. I want you to eat. He won't eat supper. He won't eat. So you come over to the kid and say, you have to eat. When's the last time you ate? I haven't eaten all day. The wife says, he hasn't eaten all day. It's impossible to deal with. Father says, you have to eat. The kid says, I'd rather have money. Well, that's not an option, son. Now you're going to eat. What does the father do? You don't move until he eats. And if I have to force feed you, I'm going to force that. I'm not going to let you get sick by not eating. Now you're going to eat right now. Why you didn't do that with the poor man? You know why? Because he's a stranger. Who's this? This is your son. Bani matem l'Hashem l'keichem. We're Kodesh Baruch Hu's children. Kodesh Baruch Hu's going to leave us a choice. You're going to take the Torah. Kafalem is har kegigis. I'm going to feed you. You're going to have your lechem. I'm going to feed you. And you're going to have to accept it. Because Bani matem l'Hashem l'keichem. That's what we want to do going up to Shavuos. We want to go up to Shavuos with a realization and a reminder, Bani matem l'Hashem l'keichem, to make the correct choices, re-energize ourselves and re-devote ourselves